thank you for coming in. We'd like to welcome candidates for Clark County Council District 3. Welcome to John Blom and Tanisha Harris. And I should note, we did invite Incumbent David Madore, and he declined our invitation. So we'll have a nice conversation with the two of you. I believe you met the editorial board members. I'm Greg Jane, the editorial page editor here, and I believe you know Katie Gillespie, a reporter, will be sitting in on this meeting. She won't be asking questions in this forum, but might want to speak with you afterwards. Okay. And just so you know, we are videotaping this. We videotape all of our meetings and post them unedited on the web for the benefit of our readers. So we'll get started here. Take just 1 to 2 minutes. Introduce yourselves, give us a little bit of background, and explain why you are running for county council. Start with Tanisha.
I'm Tanisha Harris, and I'm a lifelong resident of East Vancouver, to be exact. So District 3 is very meaningful to me. Been here 40 years, and my family has been in Clark County for 75 years. And that has a lot of reason why I'm running for county council. This is my home. East Vancouver is my home. Born and raised here. Worked for Evergreen Public Schools for close to 10 years and moved to YWCA now for the past 4 years. For me, the citizens, the voters of the 3rd District deserves a counselor who will be mindful and respectful and fair and balanced. And to me, we haven't had that the last 4 years with our current counselor. And there's a lot of issues that we can be focusing in on, but we seem to get bogged down with the pettiness and the politics. And even though this is a partisan race, you still need to represent the people. You still need to focus on the issues, what's important to the community. And for me, serving the people, working with families and children, what I've done my whole entire life, that's the reason why I'm running. I feel that the voters need a choice. They need somebody who represents them, their values, and is one of them. So that's why I'm running.
Great, thank you. John?
John Blom, running for District 3, obviously as we're here. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest as well. Grew up in Portland, graduated from Concordia University there in Northeast Portland. Spent some time out of the area, lived in Ohio for a few years where I got a master's in history, and then had the opportunity to put that degree to work, working for the Army at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas for a number of years. There in Leavenworth for a year, and then working remotely for a few years after that. When my wife and I were ready to have a family, we looked at where do we want to raise a family, and Clark County just seemed like a logical place. We love the Pacific Northwest, but looking at what kind of community we wanted to be a part of, comparing moving back to Portland or moving to Vancouver. Vancouver was the place that we wanted to call home, so that's where we chose to purchase a home in East Vancouver. At that time I got into real estate. I've sold residential real estate for the last 7 years. And I've spent 4 years on the Clark County Association of Realtors Government Affairs Committee. That's where I first really got involved with local politics, looking at the impact that the cities, the counties, our representatives in Olympia have on our lives from a day-to-day basis, on our business, on our quality of life, things like that. Looking at what's happened over the last 4 years, I think the county needs someone that can bring a more collaborative vision to that. Working with the cities and the counties through my experience in the real estate board, serving as president this year, was recognized for that with the Marshall Award for Public Leadership by the Fort last year. I've also served in the Planning Commission for the last 3 years. So over the last 4 years, I've been building a lot of these relationships that it's going to take to move our county forward, looking at things like mental health, affordable housing, all these big issues that are facing Clark County are going to take collaboration with other stakeholders, and that's something that I'll bring to the table on day one.
Great, thank you. Now we'll move on to some specific issues. And John, you mentioned you're on the Planning Commission, and without necessarily getting into the weeds or the specifics of the different plans, what are your thoughts about how the council, since we're talking about a council seat, how the council has approached that and the planning process for growth management?
I think looking at that, there's been 2 councils that have approached this. There was a council of 3 last year that I think in a lot of ways ran roughshod over the process. The incumbent in this seat really just took over the process and wrote his own plan without input from the staff, without input from a lot of other stakeholders in the community, just listening to a very small group of citizens that had an agenda they wanted to push forward. I think the council this year, the 5-member council, has been really trying to play catch up and make up for that. I think it's been a bit of a rushed process because of what happened last year. I think going forward, what we need to do is get a plan done, go through the legal defense that's going to be required of that plan, because there always are challenges to the comprehensive plan, and then go back as a group of 5 and take a really comprehensive look at the rural lands, what needs to be done to balance quality of life, the environment, diverse housing options, and really go from there.
And Tanisha, same question. What are your thoughts on how the council has approached that? How do you think they should work towards developing the growth management?
Well, obviously, we're coming up on the deadline here in June, so a plan is needed. I do appreciate the work that the Planning Commission has done, looking at all the various options and deciding on Alt 1. I'm in favor of that as well, too. I think going forward is that we need to repair the relationship we have with some of our cities. And I know the Planning Commission took into consideration the thoughts and feelings and the recommendations that the cities were putting forward to make sure this growth management plan is acceptable to them and helps them, because ultimately it's going to affect our rural cities the most. I said to somebody a couple of days ago, I go, we're in the midst of graduation season, and so it's an exciting time for our seniors going into the world, and that real life experience are going to come upon. And realistically looking forward is, what are they going to be doing 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now? And I have a number of family members and friends who now live in the rural cities. They now live in Camas and Washougal and Battleground. So this plan is going to affect our families. And so it's imperative that we make sure we get it right, and that our cities know that we are in full support of them, because they're going to be ultimately affected by it the most going forward.
Tanisha, this particular position wasn't your first choice.
No.
Give us some inside look as to how this actually plays out. And obviously that means that you need to help us understand how the Democratic Party, along with yourself, decides that you're moving from one race to another race.
Well, at the end of the day, it's always my choice as a candidate.
Always your choice?
Yes, always my choice.
But will you concede that it wasn't only your choice?
No.
You wouldn't concede that?
It was, at the end of the day, I chose this position for me, and only me and the community that I want to serve. And
so no input from anybody else?
There's a lot of people who gave me advice, their opinion, their infinite wisdom, I would say, both for when I was considering the state representative position and also for Clark County Council position as well, too.
So nobody suggested to you that you switch?
People have suggested to me a lot of things over the years.
Well,
for me,
I'm not interested in over the years.
Yeah, but for me, my political career, I have been asked about different races over the years, and I was actually asked early on by different people, take a look at the county race. But at the moment, at the time, I felt that the state race was more important to me, having been involved in the 17th LD Democrats.
So you initiated this switch?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I know there are rumors and innuendos and gossip out there about why I switched or who pressured me or forced me or coerced me. At the end of the day, if you know me personally, professionally, that's just not the case.
Okay.
I made this decision.
You cleared it up.
Absolutely. I like to clear up things that are said about me by other people who don't know me.
Good.
Yeah.
And John, there's a lot of talk today about Republicans and let's say whether or not you're really a Republican or not. If you get that question, what are your sort of strongest Republican traits?
My strongest Republican traits, yeah. I believe that the role of government is very much articulated in the Constitution, the state constitution, the county charter. That's the mandate. I think where I see a big difference between the two parties is whether we're constantly looking to expand beyond that mandate or stay within what are the authority that's directly given to whatever level of government by that governing body. So look at the charter. What are the responsibilities that the county is required to bring? It's transportation, it's parks, public safety. And that should be where our focus is, and we shouldn't be looking to expand government beyond that just for the sake of more bureaucracy or bigger government. So I think that's when it comes to local issues, that's my Republican credentials if I have to make that case.
Okay, so if I were to, and there may be other avenues that reflect this, but if I were to try to distinguish the two candidates sitting here today, and please disagree with me if I'm wrong here. But so, John, you're interested in less government and lower or no tax increases, and you might be interested in more government and higher tax increases?
I don't believe I've ever said that.
No, I mean, this is a question. It was a question. That was a question.
For me, no. What I believe in is effective government that can empower and improve people's lives. That doesn't necessarily mean more government. And when it comes to taxes, you have to be careful and mindful about what the taxes are going towards, what they're designated for, and also looking at the voters in your area. You know, I know in East Vancouver, the 17th LD, where our council is at, you know, they're not big on taxes. They're not big on raising taxes. And they, you know, a lot of times do support the Tim Eyman initiatives that have come throughout the year too. But the one thing that they do support is our school bonds and levies. That's the one thing that they have always said yes to in terms of taxes. But in terms of me and my political philosophy, doesn't just because you're a Democrat doesn't mean you believe in big government all the time and higher taxes.
All right, so just a direct question, real quick, the rest of the question. Mm-hmm. So would you be willing to sit here to say that you won't raise county taxes?
I can't say that
Okay.
certainty
at
this
John?
point.
I think we have some major budget issues facing the county when it comes to level of service. We as a community need to decide what do we want in terms of public safety, roads, parks, and then how are we going to pay for that? And I think we've had a long run of no tax increases, and that's been great for the people, but expenses rise. My budget has gone up just as the cost of food goes up, property taxes go up, other living expenses go up. The same thing happens for government. So as a counselor, I'll work to limit those increases, limit the rising expenses that the county faces. But at a certain point, if we want to have the same level of service, we need to look at how do we fund that responsibly.
Okay, so neither of you can sit here and say, I'm committed to not raising taxes if I get elected.
That would be my last option. I would say it's not going to be all right. We're going to raise the property tax 1%.
Yeah.
But yes,
I get it, but neither would be committed to say, I'm not going to raise taxes in my town.
You know, I think the incumbent in our seat has made that very difficult. If you look at the amount of money that's been given away to developers with very little to show for it, that's going to, one way or another, that impacts the general fund. So you have someone that's, you know, given away the house for the last 2.5, 3 years. The next guy that comes in is going to have to put those finances back in order. And that may require some hard decisions.
Which means it could require raising taxes.
Unfortunately, it might. Hopefully it won't.
Okay.
Courageous conversations about certain issues. That's what you might have to be looking at this next council.
And actually, and follow up on that, along those lines, talking about differences between the parties, it seems on its face that this district would be a tough go for a Democrat. Can a Democrat win the 3rd district?
I believe so.
What makes you special that you can pull that off?
I think this year, in the year 2016, both on a national level and a state level, you're seeing a lot of new voters coming out for the first time. You're seeing a different type of energy and focus from the voters that are out there. Speaking as a Democrat, I certainly have seen that the last 3 months with our precinct caucuses and our county convention. A lot of people participating in the process for the first time. They want their voices to be heard. And, you know, East Vancouver, the 3rd district, you know, is part of the 17th LD, but some of the most conservative red parts of the 17th LD are not in this district. And so the demographics, I do believe, are favorable to a Democrat this year.
So, speaking of voting, are you voting for Clinton or Trump?
I'm voting for the next president of the United States of America, the first female president, Hillary Rodham Clinton.
And John, who are you voting for?
I would answer that question if I knew at this moment. Not Trump.
Not Trump. Okay. Well, that's sort of an answer.
Third answer.
Yeah, right. Okay.
John, you mentioned the fee waivers.
Yeah.
How, if you're on the council, do you vote to overturn that? Do you continue them? Do you look at it more closely?
I think I'm just gonna add, and not Clinton either. So probably a third-party candidate. Honestly,
Okay.
we'll just clarify
Johnson?
that a
Oh,
little.
goodness.
Clarify that a little bit. Fee waivers. I think the city of Vancouver, and in the past, before the broad sweeping fee waiver, there's been some pretty good programs. I look at what happened with Chuck's Produce. That brought, I want to say the number was 40 some odd family wage jobs to the area, provided a new place for people to buy their groceries. That was a good use of fee waivers. Same with Banfield Pet Hospital. That was a good use of fee waivers to encourage family wage jobs that were going to help the community and in the end bring more than what they got from the fee waivers. You know, I look at $500,000 for 2 Dutch Bros and a BlackRock. I don't know that that was a wise investment in our community, particularly when I drive through the city of Vancouver on my way in every morning and I see several new coffee shops within the city, same as the places outside in the county that got those fee waivers that were built anyway. So I think there's a lot of evidence if you look at the reports that Scott Bailey has done in terms of job growth. You know, the incumbent likes to claim credit for a lot of jobs that happened in the city between Banfield and just recently Payless Drugs, all those companies that are coming in and aren't getting those fee waivers. So I think we're giving away a lot of money for development that would have happened anyway, and I think the ground truth shows that.
So just so that I'm clear, if you're on the county council and it hasn't already been done, you would eliminate this essential zero fee waiver piece.
Or at least target it to a jobs requirement.
Right, eliminate
Yes.
the zero fee base, maybe
Right.
place another fee waiver thing in.
I would strongly support, a replacement that was a little bit more
Right, get rid of
responsible with
that.
taxpayer dollars.
And then reinstitute something that makes more sense.
Correct.
Okay. And
Tanisha, your thoughts on the fee waiver?
I agree with Mr. Blom completely. It's interesting that Councilor Madore wants to take credit for the job creation, but as we know, they're happening within the city, and Councilor Madore doesn't always seem to be very fond of the city of Vancouver. So I find it interesting that he will take credit for something that he really doesn't really care about, truly. You know, when he makes disparaging remarks about the city of Vancouver and not really wanting to be nice or play nice with the city of Vancouver. And I guess I would remind Mr. Madore that, majority of his constituents in his district live in the city of Vancouver.
Would you guys both give me a rundown on where you stand on transportation and CTRAN? 2 topics of your predecessor's focus?
For me, we are living in the 21st century, and there is no reason why we as a community, a growing community that has close to 460,000 people in Clark County, cannot support public transportation. I do not believe, as the incumbent does, there's a war on cars. This past week, I was in many different places, including trying to find parking around here in the courthouse. And so everybody still has their cars, but we can still embrace public transportation and various modes of transportation to have our goods be moved back and forth for people to get to place. Like, again, we are a growing community, so we need to embrace public transportation. We need to support and strengthen the CTRAN decisions and make sure that they are working, for the people in the community, especially in the rural communities as well. I work with, as a CASA program specialist, I work with kids in the foster care system, dependency system. And a lot of our parents are living in battleground in the rural area communities, and they need transportation options. They need bus routes to bring them to and from their services. A lot of the services are in Vancouver. So we need to make sure that the bus routes that CTRAN provides are effective.
And the bridge?
In the bridge, we need to do something about the congestion on I-5. And so for me, I've always been in support of a new I-5 bridge.
With light rail?
I do like light rail. When I travel around the country, everybody, other cities and communities have some form of light rail, public transportation. And there's no reason why, since it's here in Portland, why we cannot expand that here to Clark County. I think it's a good investment, and I think it's a good investment for the future as well.
So I think we need to approach transportation from an economic, and C-Tran, from an economic development perspective. When I have conversations with people at the CREDC, Identity Clark County, other business groups, they care about quality of life as they're trying to recruit companies to come here. When a company is looking to relocate a corporate headquarters, they want to know what kind of public transportation is available for our employees, what is the congestion like. So we do need to address all of those issues, have an appropriate level of service for C-Tran that can provide that. So when a company says, okay, we want to relocate on, there's a lot of land still along 192nd on Mill Plain there, we want to put a corporate headquarters here, what kind of bus service is available for the employees that want to take advantage of that? We need to have a system in place that can meet those needs. It also, the congestion issues along I-5, which is one of the major problems facing our region when it comes to transportation. It is the I-5 corridor that impacts freight transportation, which is another issue for economic development. So yeah, I agree with a lot of what Tanisha said, but I think approaching it from that mindset of economic development, and yes, we do need a new bridge, and I-5 needs to be the priority. It needs to. I think it needs to be ready for some kind of expansion in the future. I don't know that Clark County right now has a demand for light rail. When I look at the time it would take, I was going to take light rail downtown a couple of months ago. It was 4:30 in the afternoon, and I looked at how long it was going to take. If I drove down to Delta Park and parked at the First Transport, it was going to be over an hour to get downtown and back. Even in the worst traffic I've ever sat on an I-5, and I spent way too many hours doing that, it still doesn't take that long. Right now we have, I want to say there's 6 or 7 different bus terminals where you can go, park, hop on a bus, no stops, and you're right downtown. I think that's a better way of providing that service for the people of Clark County than a hugely expensive light rail project. But we need to be thinking about this bridge in terms of 50, 100 years, so there does need to be the ability to expand it at some point. And I think there's a lot of groups in the community that are already looking and thinking that way.
Let me get this question in early. Sometimes it comes a little bit later. But Tanisha, if there were 2 things that you probably most strongly disagree with John, what would those 2 things be?
I can't say at the moment for what we would disagree on. I'm glad to hear about we kind of share the same vision on transportation, and I know his work with the Columbia River Mental Health Board too, and that's the area I'm involved in too with mental health services and working with families. So at the moment, maybe there might be some personality differences between us, and maybe different people involved with our campaigns in the community that we might have differences of opinion on. But at the moment, I guess I would have to know a little bit more about Mr. Blom to be able to answer that question.
Just a question point around this. Have you guys been on the podium together much?
No, we've met. Yeah. This is our first time. I met him one time before, a couple months ago.
I won't personally give you a pass because you haven't been on the podium, because you are running against each other. You probably should know more about each other. But John, can you answer that question a little bit more directly?
Can you restate the wording of the question again, just so I'm...
Give me 2 issues that you may most strongly disagree with Tanisha.
I would say the first, where I would start, and this is not so much an issue, but I think when it comes to a level of experience, I think my engagement on the Planning Commission, having worked with the cities and our legislators in Olympia, having sat down with our congresswoman to talk about issues that impact homeowners, I think a difference between the 2 of us as voters are trying to decide where they're going to cast their ballot. Having the depth of those relationships on both sides of the aisle, that's not really an issue. Up until 2 weeks ago, she was running for the state house, so I knew a fair amount about her issues for the state house. But I don't know where she stands on a lot of things impacting the county, so it's a difficult question to answer.
Well, for both of you, that's a pretty weird answer, just FYI. The idea that you're not able to distinguish issues with each other. Maybe that will develop a little bit later, but my own personal 2 cents. But I mean, obviously, voters are going to have to decide who's better for reasons. You think?
Well, I think part of the campaign is having those everyday conversations with voters, getting to know what is important to them. You can share your vision with them. You can talk to them about what issues are important to you as a candidate. But realistically, it's about those everyday conversations with voters, what's on their minds. At the end of the day, what is important to them, their families, how their families are getting by every day, how they view government, how they view Clark County government. You know, they hear a lot probably about national, but they want to also know how does, local government affects them as well too. And being involved now for politics for 10 years and working on campaigns and knocking on doors and doing phone banking, I know firsthand it's those everyday face-to-face conversations that families and parents, individuals want to have with you. And I think sometimes people want to make it Republican versus Democrat because it's a partisan race, but I think Mr. Blom and I think we could both run positive campaigns and focus on the issues that are important to us and getting to know the voters. I think the voters will make an informed decision.
And I don't want to come up and put words in Tanisha's mouth. I mean, we've seen that for the last 4 years with what David does. He's constantly putting words in other people's mouths and framing their positions. I think the community is tired of that kind of negative approach.
Okay, although looking for differences between candidates is completely different than trying to frame somebody else's argument.
Okay. Well, when I hear her say something I disagree with, I'll let you know.
Likewise.
All right, thank you.
But in having those conversations with voters, so after that and after being out there, what do you think, what is the single most pressing issue facing the county council? If you were on the council and they told you, here's one thing you can change, what would be the first thing you would change?
I think it would be the decorum that we show each other and the respect that needs to be shown to each other as county councilors. I mean, that's what drives the headlines, is the negativity, the back and forth, the arguing over who's the better Republican out of the 5 Republicans. I think that, people watching are going, what in the world is going on here?
Well, and I think people are frustrated with that. But if you're talking about a voter's daily life, that aspect of that doesn't really affect their daily life.
I think they want to know that the counselors are working for them, that they're focused on the issues, that if they happen to have...
And what's the most important of those issues?
For me, I would say the transportation issues. They want to make sure that the transportation, because transportation is tied to the economy, and they want to make sure that what is Clark County councilors doing to improve the economy? What are we doing to help small businesses? Are we working with the cities to make sure that the cities are safe, that there's resources there? Because I think that sometimes people don't necessarily distinguish between the city and the county. So they want to see us being effective in the delivery of services and what we are providing to the people.
Yeah, John, what would you say?
The comprehensive plan. I think that's, as a counselor, there's 2 things that we do. We manage the operation. There's that policy that manages the county, but then there's creating the vision of what we want the county to be. For my kids, what kind of community do I want them to grow up in? And where is the balance of appropriate use of rural lands, wise stewardship of rural lands, effective transportation networks, aging populations, healthy communities? All of those are incorporated into that document. That's the chance to not just get down into the daily grind of, authorizing the sheriff to hire more deputies or changing this from a rural arterial to a rural collector road, those things that are important that have to be done. But the comp plan, that's the chance to come and bring a vision and to bring real leadership and say, this is the kind of community that we have, and that's great, but how can we make it better? How can we look 20 years into the future to make it an even greater place to live and to raise a family?
Where do you guys, and I'll go to Tanisha first, where do you stand on the $15 minimum wage issue?
I support the raising of the minimum wage. I think we need to go in increments to make sure that as we look, I know there's what's called the Fight for 15 I know I've heard a lot of people, saying that, but I like to see it in increments so we can measure the effectiveness of it, so businesses can adjust to it. Employers can kind of manage their books better to make sure that it's effective for their employees, because also we have to look at the healthcare costs that are associated with that as well too. But I do support the increasing the minimum wage in increments.
Do you envision a $15 minimum wage somewhere down the road, and if so, at what point? 2 years, 5 years, 10 years?
I think within 5 to 10 years we'll see a $15 minimum wage. Yep.
Jen, what's your view?
Yeah, I think the impact on small businesses, particularly when you look at restaurants, things like that, coffee shops, is kind of where most of those minimum wage jobs are. I think it's a job killer for them.
So you are opposed to an increase, the $15 minimum?
I'm opposed to a $15 minimum wage, yes.
Should there be any increase in the minimum wage? Should it be lowered to help those shops?
No, I wouldn't advocate lowering it.
I think the state of Washington, what is it? Is it top or second?
It was. Now I believe it's second, and it's tied to the cost of living, so it goes up a certain amount every year. Are you in favor of just maintaining that? Leave it tied to the cost of living?
Yeah, I think that's a good practical approach to it.
There's one way you guys are different now.
Yeah.
Make a note.
Remember that.
Yeah.
What about, let's talk about legalized marijuana. Would you continue the county's moratorium on marijuana businesses?
Sure. This is a really challenging issue for me personally, because I don't think it's healthy for our communities.
The moratorium?
The legalization of
Okay.
marijuana. And on the Planning Commission, I supported the moratorium. As I've learned more about the issue, had conversations with people in the community, talked to people in my own family who are extremely conservative and very opposed to marijuana. The reality is, I had a conversation with my nephew, with my sister's permission, asking him, hey, right now, would it be easier for you to buy marijuana or alcohol if you wanted to get either of those things? And he didn't have to think about it. He said, oh yeah, marijuana, way easier to get at school than alcohol. So what are we really accomplishing by the moratorium? All we're doing is losing tax dollars. There's places where you can literally walk across the street from county jurisdiction to city jurisdiction and buy it legally. So we're losing funds. For every dollar that could have been purchased in a legal marijuana shop in the county, that's another dollar that's now going into the black market, going into some dealer's pocket, and bringing along all the problems that comes with that. So while I will be strongly educating my kids that it's not a responsible activity, that's where the education needs to happen, is at home with parents. And I think getting some of that money to help that education process would be good. So if I were on the council, I think we need to take a strong look at, are we really doing anything, or are we just trying to make ourselves feel better by having this moratorium?
Let's talk about the casino. Who likes it? Who doesn't like
Well,
it?
hey, hang on one sec. I'd like to...
I would agree, and I would just like to expand that on what Mr. Blom said. Was that, to me, this is a very difficult position for me to take as well too. As a CASA program specialist, I work in family treatment court. So I work with families who are affected by drugs and alcohol on a more serious level, and marijuana is an issue. And when we are in dependency court, our families are in dependency court, when we do the UAs, we don't want to see the THC marijuana levels come back. We want to see them either non-exist or going downward too. So when the idea of legalization of marijuana was on the ballot, me personally and professionally, I'm like, oh my goodness. I do believe in medical marijuana use, but professionally it was very hard for me to want, say, do I vote yes, do I vote no, because I'm working with families that are affected by drugs and alcohol. And the education piece, I don't have kids, but I have 3 beautiful nieces and a niece on the way and a nephew. And I too will be having a conversation about them, with education about them, about drugs and alcohol, and that includes marijuana as well too.
So on the council, would you
so
vote to overturn the moratorium?
I would
maintain the moratorium?
I would have strong considerations about overturning it, but I would want to look at it first and make sure what are we accomplishing with it. what are we accomplishing with it, and and the money that's generated from the marijuana sales, that's supposed to be going into the different funds to help with prevention. Is it going where it's supposed to be going, and is it truly working?
I'd also add too that it was approved by the voters of Clark County, that 502 passed. So, Madore likes to make a big to-do of representing the will of the voters, but it seems like that's a little bit selective when he wants to follow the will of the voters.
Well, and I just to clarify, I'm pretty sure Clark County is slightly rejected.
I thought it was 51 over.
No,
they just slightly.
Yeah.
It was close. I'm sorry.
Yeah, let's talk about the
casino.
We all, I'm sure you're up on the news, and so we know where we're at right now. Casino's being built. It's still in the court system. Nobody knows exactly what might happen in the court system. At this stage, if you were a county commissioner, or if you were out speaking to your constituents, what would you say? Do we say, hey guys, no matter what you think about gambling in this casino, it's inevitable and we ought to start working with them? Or would you sort of say the opposite, we need to fight to the bitter end and keep working against it?
No, we need to recognize and respect the Cowlitz tribe. We need to work with the Cowlitz tribe. We need to work with the city of La Center. The casino, we need to drop our lawsuit. We need to get out of that. We need to follow the lead of the city of Vancouver. The casino is here and needs to be built. The family wage jobs that it will bring in. Also, I would say that the jobs that are created also are labor jobs too, which I am full support of. I think a lot of people want the casino to be here, the entertainment options, the shopping, retail options that will be surrounding that, and I think it will be good for Clark County.
I think the Cowlitz have operated in very good faith in trying to work with the county, and the county has been a poor recipient of that. The county's getting a brand new interchange at that interchange that the Cowlitz is paying for, and they are doing a phenomenal job. The plans for it they're not doing the bare bones minimum they need to do. They really want to make this a destination. I think they've been a much better partner in this than the county has been, having looked through the documents regarding the well injection, the level of monitoring that happens, their willingness to share that monitoring with Dr. Melnick's department at the county, their cooperation with the EPA. I agree that there's no more sense in wasting taxpayers' dollars pursuing something where we're not likely to win anyway, and even if we were to win, is that really the end result that we want to have? I don't think it's a win for anyone if we were to be able to stop it, and I think the odds of that even happening are slow. So I would say, yes, let's move forward. Let's try and repair the damage that's been done because of the county's attitude, and work towards a better partnership.
And just generally speaking, there's a slight nuance to your answer. We are where we are, and we need to move forward. I think you're both answering the question essentially that way. Tanisha, you also said you think it's a good thing for the county for all the reasons that you stated. Do you also, John, think that it's a good thing for the county if you had your druthers, would you wish it's not here?
Well, it's not really an option that I have. I haven't put a lot of thought to it.
Well, you had an option, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago when it wasn't being constructed. I mean, are you in favor of or opposed to a casino being in Clark County?
I think if people want to spend their money that way, they're going to find a place to do it. So whether it's here, whether it's going up to Tulalip, whether it's going to the Oregon coast, I think it will bring some positive benefits. The concerns as far as public safety, I think the Cowlitz done a really good job of addressing those. So I wouldn't say I would give a blanket approval to a casino, but I feel like they've been good partners in the project.
Great. Any other questions? We'll move on then to give us your final pitch. Tell us why voters should support you in the election, and while you're at it, please mention any endorsements you would like to bring up. And we'll start with Tanisha.
At the age of 26, I found myself being the youngest person to receive a General George C. Marshall Public Leadership Award. And at the same time, I also received the YWCA Val Joshua Racial Justice Award. And at the time, usually awards are given after a lifetime of achievement. And I found myself very young receiving those awards, but I understood the meaning of those awards, what it meant for my future going forward, being a leader in this community, representing people of all diverse backgrounds. And so one of the questions during that interview for the Marshall Award was, what do you visualize yourself doing in 5 years from now? And I didn't quite at the time had an answer for that, and I said, I hope I'm still helping people. I hope that I'm still serving the community in some positive way. And so every 5 years since then, I've always asked myself, what am I doing? Am I on the right path? Am I still serving people? And so next January, if I am grateful enough to and lucky enough to be sworn in as a county councilor, I will still be fulfilling that question that I answered many years ago. Public service means a lot to me. It's a valuable thing to do for your people. Public service, government service is not evil, it's not bad, as some people like to think it is. It's a meaningful, impactful thing to do to serve your people. My family, my father's family was one of the first African American families here in Clark County 75 years ago. And they very easily could have said after World War II ended and the shipyards closed down and different things, they could have said, we're going back to California, we're going back to Texas or Oklahoma. But they chose to stay here, to have a family here. And my brothers and I, and my nieces or nephew, were the 4th and 5th generation of Harrises. And I've been taught that you carry yourself with pride and honor, and that when you walk out the door each day, you represent yourself, you represent your family, and you try to do good for others. I've had many opportunities to get into public service, to run for office. Sometimes there's always maybe bad timing or just wasn't ready. And this year in 2016, I found myself being ready for it, to take that next step, to continue to help people. And so that's why I'm running. I'm running for East Vancouver, the people of East Vancouver, the 3rd District, who I believe they deserve a champion on the County Council who will be mindful and respectful. And I think at the end of the day, they will vote for a candidate who is worthy of their vote.
Thank you. And any
Thank you.
endorsements?
I am endorsed by the Clark County Democrats, the 17th and 18th LD Democrats, and the Women Democrats as well, and the Southwest Washington Labor Council.
Thank you. And John?
I think our community can agree, looking back at the last 4 years, that we need to change, and that what David Madore has brought to our community has not led us in the direction that we want to go. Over a whole host of issues, looking just basically at the treatment of staff and some of the challenges that the county is now facing and the lawsuits that taxpayers are having to pay to settle as a result of that. So we can agree, I think, as a community that we need change. I think the question that it faces voters then is who's going to be the most experienced and who's going to be the right choice to take our community forward. So you say, okay, we don't want, this. What do we want going forward? I think the experience that I bring working with the cities as president of the Association of Realtors, working with county staff, with other county electeds on the Planning Commission, working with our state legislators, that experience makes me the person to lead on day one. The Planning Commission touches so much that goes into the county. I'm the person that has the experience to come in January 1st and start moving things forward. And I think that's reflected in the endorsements that I've received. I'm very honored to have the endorsement of Julie Olson, Paul Harris from the House, Larry Smith, former mayor pro tem, former Democrat County Commissioner Betty Sue Morris. So I think that the fact that I have endorsements on both sides of the aisle, and there's more on my website, also the Clark County Association of Realtors, those endorsements to me say people have recognized through working with me in the various ways that I've served the community over the last 4 years, that I'm ready to go on day one.
Great. Well, thank you very much to both of you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.